Hi everyone and welcome to my video. So today I sort of wanted to just go through some pros and cons of doing a part-time masters. When I was first looking at doing a full-time versus part-time, there wasn't really much out there. So I figured coming to the end of my masters now, did it over 2 years, so why not focus on some learnings that I've had over those 2 years and what sort of things I've found along the way that was really good and perhaps a downfall of doing a part-time masters. So the first thing I wanted to do was just give an overview of what that contact time and study time will look like. So for me, I did a sport management masters at Loughborough University in the UK. For me, I did it part-time over 2 years. So most courses, most masters courses, and again, from my experience, it may not be the same everywhere else, will be between 7 and 10 modules within the whole course. So if you're doing that full-time, it'll be split over 3 semesters. So masters will be September to September for a traditional full-time student. So you'll have, it could be an even split. It could be, 5 and 5. Oh no, sorry, as in, that was rubbish maths. It could be 4, 5, and then 1, for example. So your first semester may be 4 modules, your second semester may be a bit more, or it may be even, and then you'll have that summer module or semester for that your big project or your dissertation. So for me, I as a part-time student, those I had 8 modules and then the project, so 9 in total, and they were split over 2 years. So I can't remember the specific breakdown, but it was something like 2 sort of each year. So 2 in my first semester, my first year, 2 in my second semester. And then what happens is if you're doing it part-time, you don't have that summer semester in your first year. So full-time students will have semester 1, semester 2 and summer all throughout that September to September. For me, over 2 years, it was semester 1 and 2, where I had 4 modules, for example, and then no summer. And then this year, my second year, what it ended up being was I had 2 modules in my first semester, 1 in my second semester, and then my project in my summer semester, my third semester. So however you do part-time, you will obviously be able to choose that and have a choice. But what will likely happen is it will get split evenly over your 2 years or longer, however long you're doing part-time for. So for me, that was what my degree looked like. And part-time, what that translated to sort of was just a couple of lectures a week, maybe 4 hours of lectures. Maybe obviously if I had 2 modules in that semester, it might have been 2 2-hour lectures a week, and then maybe a seminar or workshop. Master's degrees do seem more hands-on with workshops and seminars because they want you to have a lot of discussion. So chances are a part-time master's will look like for you is 4 hours or 6 hours of contact time a week, whereas full-time it's obviously split in your first semester over 4 modules, so it will most likely be double that, so 8 hours of contact, and then you might have on those workshops and seminars which might bring it up to 10 to 12 hours. So considerably a lot more work. So I want to go through the main pros and cons that I found. So for me, the first pro and the first con of doing a part-time master's is the finance. So for me, and for anyone doing a part-time, you have to consider finances, and that's probably the biggest factor of doing a master's. So full-time, you'll do it over 1 year. That means you pay all your tuition fees for that 1 year, and you pay one lot of obviously rent, or if you're going to be living near the university, you pay your accommodation fees for 1 year. So your master's loan at the moment, as of really in 2022, it's about 11.5 grand as a maximum master's loan. And for me and my master's course, it costs about 11.5 grand. So chances are your master's loan will just break even on your tuition fees. So you actually get given that money. It's not like undergrad where it's paid directly for you. You'll see that 11,500, and you can choose to do with that what you wish. So if you want to spend that on accommodation and use whatever money to pay your tuition fees, because tuition fees can be paid in installments, as long as it's paid before you graduate, that's fine. It doesn't actually have to be paid by specific set times. So that's a really important thing to factor in. So the sort of massive con with doing it part-time is that you end up paying 2 lots of accommodation fees. So I went and lived in Loughborough, so tuition fees were obviously split evenly. I had 5.5 grand, for example, for my first year, and 5.5 grand in my second year, and the same with my tuition fees. So my tuition fees were split 5.5 grand the first year, 5,500 the second year. So I could do what I wanted with that 5,500. Chances are is that first year I had a lot of money saved up, and this is a massive thing, is that I didn't have a rich family, so I took a year out and I saved £10,000 of my own money to support my masters over 2 years. So that 10 grand then went on to my living costs, and that was purely for my living costs. I spent that 5,500 in my first year straight off the bat onto my tuition fees. But if you're someone that's working part-time alongside your masters, you can choose to spend that on your accommodation, and then choose to pay the fees when you have that money later on. So that's a real perk, is that you don't have to spend that 5,500 on tuition fees. Obviously they do need to be paid, and you know, for that first year you have to pay off those modules for that first year before you commence then your second year. So finances are a massive thing, and the thing with part-time is that obviously you are then splitting over 2 years, whereas full-time it's a bit cheaper because you're not doing accommodation for 2 years, but that's all dependent on individual factors. So continuing on with finance, something that you have to really consider as a part-time student, and this is quite a big con, is that you will have to pay council tax. So this is an oversight for a lot of people. You're a part-time student, you're only exempt from council tax when you're full-time. So again, full-time students do not have to pay council tax, and therefore they save quite a bit of money on that. So for you as a part-time student, whether that's over 2 years, whatever, the council will see it as you're part-time, and therefore you're eligible to pay council tax. And that was a massive blow for me. I hadn't realised that. And it's quite a significant impact when you're looking at the amount of money you have to pay. So this is another con and a real consideration for you if you're thinking about doing part-time, is that you will have to pay council tax fees. Again, it's based on geography and how expensive your area is. So when I was in the Midlands and Loughborough, my council tax, because I live with students and so I was the only one paying council tax, it was about £1,500. So you get a single person discount, but it's not that significant. So if you are a single person or living with students who don't have to pay, you will be paying quite a lot of money. So again, if you're part-time and you're looking to live near the university, have a look at whether you have the budget for council tax, 1,500 to about £2,000 a year. And then have a look at also whether you want to live with other people that pay council tax. So in my second year of my masters, I lived with another worker who actually earned money, so she had to pay council tax. So that meant that my council tax was split, and it was about half of what I paid the previous year. So a massive significant impact. And if you are doing part-time, that money adds up. You know, £1,000 to £2,000 a year is very significant in terms of budgeting. So that's a massive consideration. And a bit of a pro tip as well, a bit cheeky, and I hope no one from the council's watching, is that if you go to the same university, so if you go to Loughborough undergrad and then Loughborough postgrad, and you do it straight through, sometimes the council doesn't notice. So this is a pro tip, is that if you move away like I did to save some money and come back, the council will be aware of you, and they will end up going through your letting agent to find out who you are, basically. However, I know some people that haven't had to pay council tax when they did a master's straight through, because the council never followed it up. They just saw that they were a student again for another year and assumed that they were still full-time. So if you're doing part-time, you may get a year where you can be a bit cheeky and the council doesn't actually look into it. So it's a bit of a pro tip. So if you are considering doing the same undergrad to postgrad, same institution, or you might be living in the same area, you may end up having, to skip council tax, and they may not notice. But I know someone that didn't and then had to repay it. So that's just a word of wisdom. If they ask, you have to be honest, but if they don't ask, then don't tell them. So for me, one of the biggest pros of the part-time masters is the time that you have. For me, I did straight from college to undergrad to postgrad. And what it meant was that I never had work experience. And so if you do a part-time masters, it's a fantastic way to get work experience under your belt whilst also gaining your master's degree. So a lot of people, full-time master's degree, it's so intense that you may not have the time to you won't have the time to actually work alongside it. And then you'll graduate and you have to have a look at your CV and see if you've actually got enough to go into the job that you want. So a massive benefit of part-time masters is that you can work alongside your degree, whether that's in, just to earn money, or whether that's relevant job experience. So for me, I did a part-time masters because I volunteered a lot outside of that. So what happened over the 2 years is that I essentially had two part-time, my master's part-time, my volunteering part-time. And at the end of it, I got a PhD with that organisation I volunteered with. So a massive pro is that you can work part-time alongside your master's. And when also looking at that pro of time, it's also a massive consideration that you also have much more of a social life. So a lot of people look at, how can I balance my work life to earn money to sustain my master's and doing my master's, whereas a lot of people neglect that social life element. And it's so important to your well-being to obviously have that time to meet new people. Certainly if you're moving to a new institution, it's so important to pick up society, support sports, and have support systems there for you. So a massive bonus for me is that I did part-time. I was able to play rugby alongside of it, and get heavily involved in the social side as well. It was the best of both worlds, where I could adequately do my master's and also have a good social life just for my well-being. I did the first year of my master's during COVID, and that was a massive impact for me in terms of that social life. So yeah, so when you're looking at masters, you also want to be having a social life. And I think a lot of those full-time master's students I saw really struggled to keep up with having, lots of friends, meeting new people, doing a sport, sort of getting out there instead of just sitting in their room all the time and doing their full-time masters. And it is very full on. And again, when looking at that time, I know I said about a part-time job. I think the biggest thing you have to think about is, you don't want to get too dragged down in the job to sustain your masters. So if you're working part-time and you need the money to sustain your masters, you don't want that to consume you. And what happens is that a lot of people may end up going, I don't have the finances for it, I need to up my hours. And they end up then working almost full-time and neglecting their studies. So for you, the biggest thing you need to think about is, should I save before? Should I take a year out to save? Or can I work alongside my masters, but will that work to the detriment of my studies? And that's a real consideration, because if you end up having to work full-time, neglecting your studies, then what's the point of doing it in the first place? So it's a real important consideration to think. So another thing is also your ability to manage stress and your well-being. So part-time for me, it enabled me to really focus on every assignment I had and every exam I had, whilst also maintaining a good social life and sport life as well. A lot of the full-time students would end up having 3 essays on at once and then an exam, for example, to top it off. So sort of an overall layout was that if they had 4 modules, for example, they may have had a 50-50 split between exam and assignment. And what I ended up seeing was a lot of the full-time students just had constant work going on. And you have to think about whether that suits you. So they had, 2 essays to do before December, for example. And then after December, they'd have 3 essays or, 2 essays and then 2 exams, for example. So from what I saw, it was incredibly full on. And then you also have to take into account then your project, your dissertation. So at Loughborough, ours started sort of after the December. We started a research module, research methods module, where we sort of learn all about how our project would look in sort of January time. And then we had our first half hand-in for May. So what happened was those full-time students had multiple essays to do, their dissertation due in May, and then June marked our exam period. So they had, after sort of January, a crazy couple of months ahead of them. Whereas for me, I did 1 module in semester 1, so I literally had 1 essay to do, and then I could focus solely on my project, which is due in May. And then that meant I had then 2 more weeks, and all I had was 1 exam as well, because that 1 module was 50% assignment, 50% exam. So essentially I just had an essay to do, could focus on my dissertation, and then had 1 exam. And as a result, I completely smashed them because I had the time to do it. Whereas the impression I got was those full-time students are really sort of half-arsing a lot of those essays, because their primary focus was on their dissertation, because of the extreme weight put on dissertation marking and the credits that you get from it. So that's a massive thing for me, how you handle stress, how you handle workloads as well. If you're someone that likes exams, there's no real optional modules with masters, so you can't, plan it ahead. It will be a constant essay format and then exam format as well. So for me, it worked really well for me that I could just put the time and effort into the things that I wanted to do. I wasn't split between lots of essays and having to choose between my master's project, and that's a massive consideration as well. And so I figured, why not give an overview of what I've spent. So for me, over those 2 years, the loan aside, because I'll pay that whenever, my own money on, to live, to have accommodation for those 2 years was probably about £15,000. So again, have a think about whether you want to take a year out, work, earn some money so that you don't have to work part-time, because I think it's a big challenge to work part-time alongside your masters, and also have a think about whether it's something that you want to do, whether you want to get job experience alongside your masters as well. I really recommend that, because a lot of people that go all through uni will come out of the end of it and go, what experience have I actually got? And when you're looking for jobs, and this is again what I found, and it's a bit of advice for you, is that it does not matter what degree you have if you don't have experience. So really important, that experience element is really important. And if you're looking for sort of top level jobs when you first come out your masters, you're not going to get them unless you have experience. So I really recommend part-time masters. It is more money overall though, and that's the sort of summary, is that full-time is really intense. It's really compact. It's a lot of things packed into 1 year. However, it is cheaper. So accommodation for 1 year, you don't have to pay council tax. And obviously you graduate after 1 year, whereas a part-time is more stress-free. You have the ability to get work experience or work alongside of it. But it's obviously over 2 years, 3 years, and as a result, you pay more council tax. So it is far more expensive. You end up probably paying double what you would for a full-time master's. So yeah, just a few learnings from me. I'd love to know if people want to learn any more from it. I went to uni in the Midlands, whether people want to learn more about Loughborough itself, being a very good sports university. But yeah, so let me know if there's any questions. I hope this has been at all valuable for people. I'm pretty sure there's probably a lot of things I haven't covered, but I just wanted to give an overview because the finance elements are really important, and that was a massive decider of me whether I even did a master's at all. So that was me from having to save £10,000 of my own money and then work alongside the summers, winter breaks and things like that. So yeah, hopefully this has been useful, but yeah, let me know any questions.